And then welcome everyone.
It's recording, isn't it recording?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
you're recording, so go ahead.
I thought you were giving the welcome.
No, I thought you were doing these slides. I mean, this is new.
Yeah, I'm going to do it during my welcome.
Oh, okay, well, you want me to
Just
get
go ahead,
started?
Emily, these slides.
Okay. Welcome everyone. Today is Saturday, October 2nd, 2021. I am Emily Persincula-Lawson, and I'm the National President of the Filipino American National Historical Society. Welcome to our Young Filipino People's Far West Convention 50th Anniversary Reunion, 1971, Birth of Filipino Americanism, where we'll have live oral history interviews. I'm going to just show you a few slides before we begin, just to give you some virtual meeting tips for today. This event is being recorded. Please mute your microphone and all electronic devices. Please unmute it if it is your turn to speak. There's a chat feature that you can also use as well. If you're on social media, those are our hashtags. You can look at our History Month theme this year is based on our topic for today. And that's our lineup. Later today, after the show, after the panel, we will be a community partner for the Songs from Larry, a new musical produced by Brava Theater, which many of our FONS members are part of. And also it's based on the research of our late national scholar, FONS national scholar and trustee, Dr. Don Boholano Mabalan on the life of Larry Itliong. Next Thursday, if you enjoyed today and you want to continue some more, we hope you'll join us for our first partnership with One Down and Kumu, where we will have a Far West Convention reemergence to continue this discussion and to also learn from those young activists of today. So we hope those of you who are part of the Far West Convention back in the day will join us with some of the activists of today to have a Far West Convention reemergence. Thursday, October 7th, 7 to 9 p.m. on Kumu. So go ahead and download the app.kumu.ph. And shout out to Leo and Joanne for setting this up for us. Our online auction is next weekend, October 9th to 10th, 2021. It will open on Saturday, October 9th, and it will close at 6 p.m. Pacific, October 10th on Sunday. We have a lot of great items for you to bid on. You can preview the auction catalog at this address, tinyurl.com/FANHS lowercase auction 2021. And shout out and thank you to Bibiana Cordova Shannon and Adore Peretta Yano for coordinating that once again this year. Save the date and return to where it all began, where the Far West Convention began, where FONS began, back at Seattle University, my hometown of Seattle, for our FONS 2022 19th Biennial National Conference, August 11th to 13th, 2022. We'll also have tours, hopefully on August 9th, 8th, 9th, and 10th at the beginning of the week. You can get updates at fons-seattle.org or on any of our Facebook pages. And you can also see the wonderful promo video that Adore made on that page. You can go to tinyurl.com/FAHM 2021 to see a whole bunch of other events that are happening for Filipino American History Month. October is Filipino American History Month. And if you want to add your items to that list, please contact Terry Torres at our FONS Stockton chapter. And if you're on social media, please use these hashtags. Hashtag FAHM, FAHM 2021, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram and on Facebook as well. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to say really briefly that I'm honored to be here to welcome you. I was a youth born and raised in Seattle on the FYA drill team. And I would not be who I am and where I am today without all of you. And I was fortunate to meet some of you 25 years ago at the 25th reunion. And I hope to see you again tomorrow, today, and in August for our conference. Take it away, Alan.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Bonds Now, which is a program of the Filipino American National Historical Society Hampton Roads chapter. As in tradition and in past Zoom sessions that we do, we start off with a moment of silence. So everybody bow your heads. And think about those who are not here with us, especially those that left the Philippines, who came to America to put a roof over our heads, food in our stomachs, and to provide opportunities that were denied to them. Thank you. Okay. It's good to see everybody here. Let me share a screen real quick. Everybody should have got this informational packet that we usually send out. In case you don't know, but all this blue stuff here, you click on that and you'll have stuff pop out of everywhere. So hopefully you guys thumb through this whole thing because it'll make sense while you were doing the program, and a lot of background as far as what's going on in America. Let me scroll down here. And it was a huge identity crisis. I think we really need to understand this. This was 50 years ago. And for me, I was born and raised in Seattle, and we were born brown, but not Filipino enough. We were raised in Black neighborhoods, but not Black enough. And we live in a white man's society, but not white enough. So we were nothing, nameless, faceless, invisible, lost, worthless, no pride, no vision, directionless, hopeless, pathetic, rough, wild, but we were raw. And Uncle Fred coined the term, Filipinos are a minority within a minority within a minority. Back then we had questions, who am I, what am I, where do I fit in? So you had all these terms come out, Filipino, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So please, this was back in 1971. And if you start filtering through this informational packet, the conditions are almost like what it is today. So luckily, we have the Far West Convention that was held in Seattle. And we're gonna have a tremendous two-day event. It's gonna be one of its kind. Auntie Dorothy is gonna be conducting, and Emil will be conducting live oral histories, on the spot. So it's gonna be spontaneous. It's not gonna be clean. It's not gonna be tidy. It's gonna be rough. But that's what the movement is about. Not everything goes well. We will fall down, we will make mistakes, but hey, we're survivors. We will get up and keep on fighting. So without further ado, I'm gonna stop share and I'll hand it over to Auntie Dorothy, who is gonna lead this session. So everybody please mute and show your face or keep your screens live. And we really appreciate that. And so Auntie Dorothy, it's all you. Let's
Okay.
give Auntie Dorothy a hand, everybody.
What I'm going to do is a historical background of how this came about. The Filipino American National Historical Society welcomes all of you on this 50th anniversary of the Young Filipino Peoples Far West Convention, which took place in 1971 and has been called as the beginning of the Filipino American movement. The host was the Filipino Youth Activities, which for 14 years provided almost 1,000 Filipino youths wholesome leisure time activities such as folk dancing, drill team, teen club, Tagalog classes, baseball and basketball teams, and special events. With funding from the Model Cities Youth Division in 1971, the FY rented office space on Seattle University's campus. When a college student in our program asked How could you meet Filipinos from communities outside of Seattle? The FYA decided to hold a forum in 1971 where young people could meet and express their thoughts, their convictions, ideals, and complaints with fellow Pinoy and Pinay peers. Anthony Ogilvy was named chair for what was to become the first Young Filipino People's Far West Convention. He spent the next months pushing the concept, visiting and communicating with different Filipino American youth-oriented groups and individuals throughout the West Coast. The mid-60s and early 1970s were important, historic, and often chaotic times in America, with riots after the death of Martin Luther King, the fight for civil rights and voting rights, and anti-Vietnam marches, the need for affirmative action, open housing. And then we had the increasing number of immigrants from the Philippines with their growing needs. Many in the FYA were already engaged in this fight for equality in America. We selected a quest for emergence as a conference theme and planned a 3-day program with noted Filipino American activists, community activists sharing their experiences. We planned for 300 attendees, but more came not only from Washington and California, but also Oregon, Alaska, Hawaii, and Guam. The second day of the conference, we noticed a sense of discontent among a number of the young people. We then changed the format, stopped further presentations by older scheduled speakers, and then had an open mic where only young adults and teenagers were allowed to share their experiences, their frustrations, and hopes for unity. Today, 9 participants of that, well, sort of idealized convention will share stories of who they were 50 years ago, what they expected of the conference, what they learned, if anything, and what they became after the conference. Perhaps some may even offer a vignette about the magic of the Maka Dance on the last night of the conference. The speakers today are, and in order in the first, for this first session, are Anthony Ogilvy, who is the chair, Ben Menor, Luna Jamiro from Stockton, Miguel Rodez, who had just come from the Philippines and brought a taste of what was happening in the Philippines as a speaker, Furman Amutan, Maria Castellano, Luisa Kia, Mel Lagasca, and Maria Battiola. Apparently you can read their bios online. So without further ado, I'll open it up to Anthony Ogilvy, and people will speak in order of the what I've placed here.
Thank you, Dorothy. Am I on? Am I on,
Yes,
Alan?
yes.
Okay, thank you, Dorothy, for that. I think a very brief and very accurate, presentation on how the whole thing got started. For those of you who don't know me, and most of you don't, my name is Tony Ogilvy. I go by Abe Beretta Ogilvy as well, because I'm a Philippine-born Filipino American, and I, with my family, came here back in 1945, and got involved living in the central area of Seattle. Got involved with the FYA, and I will say that I have long been a family friend and member of the FYA, which Dorothy and Fred started. In fact, Fred Cordova was my basketball coach when I was in the 5th grade. While in the FYA, I was a member of the drill team, the teen club, and eventually became a moderator. Pardon me? Oh. Prior to the Far West Convention, I was a campaign chair for a local Filipino running for political office, whom the community thought would be embarrassing. However, I with a number of other individuals campaigned for him, and he came in 9th, 3rd out of 12 candidates. So the Filipino community saved face, I believe. But at the same time, I was involved in a number of Filipino, Asian, and other civil rights initiatives and demonstrations. The most dramatic for me was when, in the summer of 1969, I led the confrontation with the University of Washington Vice Provost, who was heading the university's Office of Educational Opportunities program in 1969 to include Filipino students. And they met, the University of Washington acquiesced to all the demands that we had submitted. A year later, I got hired at Salem University as the Assistant Director of Minority Affairs and Special Programs. So when Dorothy had asked me, would I be interested in leading and planning the implementation of the first Young Filipino People's Far West Convention in August 1971, God, that was no problem. In fact, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity, so I said yes. And so, so on a personal note, I want to thank Dorothy for giving me this opportunity, and I'll share some other stories later. But thank you.
I don't know, is Ben there?
Yes, I am, Auntie.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay.
Can you see me, or am I a blank image? I'm on my phone. I'm over here celebrating my students' reunion of Mountain View High School.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Which, yeah, and we go back as far as 1942. Anyway, I just want to express also my gratitude and appreciation for what this movement has done for me. Already when I first came to the convention, we were already doing the things that maybe others were just getting into. We were already activists at the Foothill Community College. The Filipinos were the leaders in the APA community, leading demonstration, marches, sit downs, and so forth to demand our rights to participate fully in the university. But we became more seasoned after the conference, and the fact that we were no longer an island, but we were now connected with so many of our other fellow brothers and sisters of the Far West Convention. What inspired me when I heard the speech of Uncle Fred and made me realize what I already presumed, being an invisible minority. And that was a more important push to what I needed to do when I went on to University of California, Santa Cruz. And there we wrote a book, and that included Uncle Fred, called Pinoy Know Yourself, because it was about the identity movement that Anthony and his leadership created with all of us young Filipino Americans. I'm a 1.5 generation, which is I was born in the Philippines, but came here when I was 5, and I grew up in the farms of San Jose, and then, of course, continue to do things that the invisible minority could not do, play football, participate in school, and so on. But I think this movement gave many of us the not only challenge, but the strength to say that we're not alone. And by not being alone, we were able to take risks and to do what was something that maybe before, including my dad, was a silent minority, that they did not want to rock the boat. Whereas this movement said, we're going to rock the boat, and we're willing to take the risk of risking our lives as well as our social status. So again, this movement became very important to all the things that's happened. It forced me to run for city council. It forced me to promote education to the Filipinos so that we got more Filipinos in education and administration, including getting a Filipino first-time deputy chief of police in San Jose, the 10th largest city in the United States. And so we made a difference. And I think that's what was most important about this conference. As we left Seattle, we were given our walking orders to make a difference for ourselves, for our community, and the community of the nation of Filipinos. Thank you very much for allowing me to share this.
Thank you. Luna Jamero. Luna?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and new faces. But as Ben and Anthony have already said, and I know we don't have a lot of time and we have other speakers. But in 1971 was a pivotal time in my history. I had just returned from the Philippines. Just prior to the Philippines, I had left a job as a social worker, a very establishment job with the county. I just wasn't happy with it. I started working for the poverty action programs, and I was supervising a bunch of Filipino teenagers at the time, just prior to going to the Philippines. And we were also working with Jose Bernardo, and that was about the time that the funding of the first residential commercial Filipino center was funded by the feds. And so that brought a lot of attention, and we got a lot of attention at the 1971 conference because of that. So 1971, December of 1971 was a very enlightening one. When I and other Filipino adults accompanied our teenager Filipinos, Filipino youth who had never left the state of California, by the way, and many of them had never even left their parents' side, but they trusted us. For some reason, they trusted us, but they were exposed just as we were to the kind of discussion and exchange that I personally never really experienced with so many other Filipinos, Pinoys and Pinays. And, you know, when we first entered Seattle University, it was very mind-blowing to see, you know, it was like a whole bunch of brown faces, and we're all there for the same reason. And I felt that this was definitely going to be a change for me, and a change it was going to contribute to many of the things that happened in our own community. And we were impressed with a lot of the, for one thing, the Filipino pride that we experienced watching the drill team. Some of our students did not know or were not aware of our, excuse me, Muslim origins because they simply did not know the history in the Philippines. And I think Fred and Dorothy brought that out. And I think that kind of pride where you saw, you know, that almost that defiance in the way they stood and said to us, all of us, that, you know, we're here, we count, we're just as important as anyone else. We choose no longer to be an invisible minority. And I grew up on a labor camp, and my parents came in the 1920s. So they faced a lot of struggles, as many of my uncles and the Manongs that lived in our camp. So, you know, they did not want to do us harm by being rabble rousers or whatever it was. And so our life on the labor camp and living in our community was two separate things. I mean, we had our own life. Our life in the labor camp was almost like being in the Philippines. And we were surrounded by mostly Filipino men. We were also, we had all the trappings of what we knew and what Filipinos like to do, which is gambling. We had a pool hall. We had, you know, we had chicken fights, the bulong, sablongs. We had that every Sunday. And so we felt that this was, everybody lived like this until I went to school. I didn't realize I was living actually two different existences. But there in the 1971 conference was, I think it brought forth and really gave light to a lot of the confusion I had at the time of my own identity. And it also brought to light a lot of the history that we never read about in our history books. And, you know, we were all there searching for our own identity, and the theme, Quest for Emergence, was very appropriate because I was then 27 years old. You know, I mean, I was a single mother then. I had completed my college education, worked in, you know, the county for about 4 or 5 years. And so, you know, there were a lot of things, disillusionment that, you know, happens when you find out that things are not always as they seem to be. So, you know, I'm not sure, Dorothy, how much time I know there's a lot of other things that need to be discussed. So at this time, I'm just treating this as a intro to, you know, this the beginning of the conference. I guess we'll get into more details towards the end, because I do want to talk about FERC, and I do want to talk about a couple of other things, but I think at this point,
We'll have time.
I'll refer to the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Luna. Okay, Riddell, Regis?
Okay, hi, Dorothy. Behind me is my wife of 42 years, Edna. And Dorothy and Fred were our ninong and ninang in our wedding. And the other ninong was Philip Veracruz. So there's history right there. But Edna and I met at the Seattle Convention. Of course, it would take 8 years before we actually got married. But as Dorothy was saying, I arrived in San Francisco in March of 1971. I had been an activist in the protest demonstrations against Marcos in the Philippines, when many of the student leaders like myself started disappearing, and then their bodies would be found after they had been tortured and killed. And my parents decided if I was going to reach 21, I was 18 at that time, that they were going to exile me to San Francisco, so to stay with an uncle. But instead of staying with my uncle, I moved into the I Hotel. This is the I Hotel, and because I knew that was where Filipino manongs had been living since the 20s and 30s. And at the I Hotel, that was where young Filipino Americans from UC Berkeley, San Francisco State City College were coming in, volunteering, and setting up programs. So I got to meet the leaders, and I proposed to them that we put out a community newspaper, and they were all in agreement, and we put out the Kalayaan International in May of 1971, about 2 months after I arrived. And we had 10,000 copies, which we distributed around the country from New York to LA to Hawaii. And we had enough money for May and June. And then we had to face the problem that we didn't have money for July. And that was when Tony Ogilvie came from Seattle to talk about the convention that was going to be planned. I'd never met him before, never heard of him before, but he did bring up that he could help me get the funds to put out the third issue. That was when, aha! So Tony introduced me to his uncle, who provided us the funds to put out our third issue, which carried a full advertisement for the convention and news articles about it. And we started talking to the people who were with the Kalayaan. We had a collective of about 15 people from the Bay Area. And we started talking about how we could bring people up to Seattle, get people to go there. And we chartered a bus, and I think we were the largest delegation to come to the Seattle Convention. And that was because Tony was able to help us fund our newspaper. So there's a lot of things that happened there. My expectations were very high because I was very impressed with Tony, and Tony was able to communicate the commitment of the people in Seattle and what their vision was going to be. This quest for emergence was going to be really the opportunity to bring Filipinos and Filipino Americans and different parts of the country together. And I was excited about that. Yeah, the others are in the next part.
Thank you. Furman Amutan?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'd like to say hello to Rodell and his wife. But anyway, going back to 50 years ago, I remembered it was the end of my first year of teaching, and I was looking forward for a restful summer. But however, earlier that year, there was a meeting of Bay Area educators and activists at Bessie Carmichael in the South of Mission District. They had discussions about important issues, as well as giving out info concerning the Young People's Convention that was to be held in Seattle. So we spread the news around toward the Salinas Valley. And so we got a group of ex-college graduates and as well as several high school students who were very enthusiastic about going to Seattle to see what it was like. So we rented cars and we drove all the way that whole night towards Seattle and made it the following morning for the first day of registration. Now, I can only talk about my expectations. And I didn't have the question in terms of question about identity, because coming from the Midwest in a tight Filipino community of military families, there was cultural tradition that was passed. So there was not a question of identity. However, attending the convention, my eyes began to open up in terms of there are different young Filipinos coming from different places. So their experiences were different from mine. And I wanted to hear their experiences and learn about their history. But most of all, my expectation was to take something from the convention that I could apply in real life situation. That's what I was hoping for.
That's it. Okay, thank you, Furman. Maria Castellano. Maria?
Sorry. All right. Most of you know that I'm one of Dorothy's younger sisters. And just in general, I always believed that if it wasn't for Dorothy and Fred having them as older siblings, I would not have a social conscience at all. We had wonderful parents who raised 9 kids, but it was about appreciation for family that we got from them. But for Dorothy and Fred, I believe my social conscience came. So when Dorothy was started planning for the conference, I was associated by affiliation and helping wherever I could, that kind of thing. So I didn't have any real expectations about it. But as Anthony mentioned, we also grew up in the central area of Seattle, and we were Black when we were around our Black friends, white when we were around people at school or other activities. And then the Filipinos as a group in Seattle, we did have a strong community where they used to have, but it wasn't a political community in that way. It was more of a social kind of community that we had. Let me see, what else would I want to say? My expectations, like I said, I didn't have any particular expectations, but some things did come out of it for me. And I'll give later on, I want to talk about some things that affected me personally, of things that happened during the conference. But for me personally, I was 28, a little year older than Luna. I was going through a divorce, a separation, and I had became a single mother of 4 and 4 boys, and I was working 2 jobs. During the course of the conference itself, I started thinking about my own Filipino-ness. I mean, was I this 1/3 this, 1/3 this, 1/3 this kind of Filipino, or what's gonna happen? I decided during that time that my name on my birth certificate was very anglicized. My mother did that. Mary Benedict. And I thought, they call me at home Maria. So I wanted it, and my middle name was Benedicta. So I went and legally changed my name right after the conference to Maria Benedicta. I took Ilocano lessons. Very proud to be an Ilocano, although most people in the Northwest, the earlier flow of immigrants were Filipinos. I mean, Filipinos. They were Ilocano Filipinos. And so I did that. I worked for FYA during that time too, and I was looking for the militancy Northwest or Pacific or Puget Sound people had was a very different kind of militancy than what you found in the Bay Area. And we learned the differences that are marked differences, which we'll talk about later. But I did something I thought I was one first act of rebellion was I happened to find out that what do you call that? There was a souvenir store on the waterfront, and in going to the souvenir store, found some postcards that had Filipino tribal people with tails. And I brought that home. I got very incensed. I said, I'm going to write somebody about this. I'm going to complain. So I wrote a letter to the guy who owned it, found out who he was and everything. I just went overboard. I CC'd all the city council people. I CC'd the mayor. I don't know who else I did, but I was stupid enough and cowardly enough. I didn't even put my own real name. I put another name. Anyhow, the guy asked for a meeting with us. And at the meeting, we had the meeting at the school many of us went to. And he came, and like Anthony was there. There were several other people that were there. And they asked, I sat in the back of the room, and he asked to see who this Maria Bokingking was, which is like a nickname. And I didn't raise my hand. I was afraid to raise my hand. I didn't want to stand up for myself then, or for my cause. And then he proceeds to introduce a person that was with him, and it was his Filipino wife. So it was a wild thing. Here I am thinking, oh my God, I'm condemning this man. He's got a Filipino wife. But anyhow, that was my way of expressing it. It was too much. I didn't learn how to tone down what I was feeling or assess the importance of the thing I was upset about. So anyhow, I would like to talk more about what I saw of the people that came to the conference and our differences or similarities. And I'd like to talk about a couple other things like that. So thank you.
Thank you. Lou Sakia. Lou?
Hello. Do I press this?
We're doing it first.
Lou, you're fine. Yeah.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to thank Dorothy for inviting me to talk this Zoom. I'm not very comfortable speaking on it, but Fred and Dorothy took me in when I was trying to get up to Alaska back in I was there in 69, but then 68, and then they took me in 70, so I was able to meet the family and everything. They're like my real, well, they were great role models. They just took me in and everything. And my brother had met him before, my brother Seraphin. But I just like to say I was born and raised here in San Francisco. And I was born and raised in San Francisco in 1949. So that makes me an original San Francisco 49er. And we're playing Seattle Seahawks tomorrow. So that should be a hell of a game. So I'm looking forward to that. But what I'd like to say is I was back in the 70s, early 70s. I started going to San Francisco State. I was a beneficiary of the San Francisco State strike. And I was in the EOP program. And I took a lot of ethnic studies classes and learned I started going down to the I Hotel to do volunteer work, and that's when I started getting involved. And I also started writing. Well, I was writing before then, but there were so many inspirational aspects of, finding your identity and the monomes. There were so many issues that was going on at the time. I know I don't have much time. There's so many memories I have. They're all jumbled up and stuff. So what I'd like to write is a poem I wrote about identity back then, because that's where I was coming from. And I think a lot of people are still going through. And it was a poem called Chameleon Brown. One like this: change, change like a chameleon do, from white to black, from brown to blue. Just as to say that clothes are not the skin of the man, just as skin is not the essence. Shed that skin that ain't a part of you, and change, change like a chameleon do, from white to black, from brown to blue.
Word.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yay.
Woo!
Yeah.
Thank
Got
you
it.
very much.
That was nice.
Thank you again, Dorothy, and everybody for holding this for us. A lot of memories, good memories.
Yeah. Okay, Mel Lagoska.
Hi, Dorothy. Hi, everybody. It's really an honor to be a part of this panel, and it's good to see familiar faces and new faces. And I hope to expand my network from now on, simply because of what we're doing now. But special thanks to Alan and the coordinators of this event. We couldn't do it without your expertise. But going back to me in 1971, I was 24 years old. I had been working at Sandia Lab for 3 years, so I had a top secret clearance. Prior to that, I was a farm laborer while I was going to school, and I worked in the Central Valley and did the row crops and worked alongside the Monongs to get a tremendous experience of working side by side with the Monong. And I spent 65, 66, 67 in Orca Cannery. I was an Alascaro prior to working at Sandia. So I had a lot of social experience, but also back in Stockton, well, let me go back to a little bit about my family. My mom is Black and Irish, and she was born in Tacoma, Washington. So I'm originally from the Tacoma, Seattle area. And she was born in 1916. And she married my dad from Vigan, the Ilocano, back in 1934. And my dad, he had medical problems, and he passed away at the age of 44. But my mom had moved our family to Stockton in the summer of '54. So that's a little bit about my background in terms of where I lived. But I was involved with different organizations in Stockton, California, prior to going to the convention, and it was. Going to the convention was really a validating session. The stuff that I was doing, it validated that it was important to get involved with civic issues, social issues, housing issues. And at the time, like Luna Jamero had mentioned, we were starting on the Filipino Center project. And it is an iconic project that's still in existence. And I had the honor of working my way onto the board of directors back in the mid '70s. So I spent 40 years as a board member on that board of directors of the Filipino Center, and I actually got to see a 40-year housing mortgage get paid off. So the Filipino Center, for those who don't know, takes up 1 city square block in downtown Stockton, and it is a iconic figure, and it's still going on, and it's still a source of pride for Filipino Americans, not only in Stockton, but around the United States, all over the world. It's the only one. I'll kind of leave it at that. And thanks again, you guys, for putting this together. You can see behind me, I've got some memorabilia of the Far West Convention in Stockton. Some of the places, some of the people, this chart back here list at least 30 different towns and cities that were represented at that Far West Convention in Stockton. But anyway, it's great seeing everybody, familiar faces and new faces. So I get to meet new friends. And we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. In this segment, the last speaker is Maria Battiola.
Hi, Auntie. There's a little bit of reverb. Hi, Auntie. Thank you so much for conducting this as an oral history, a group oral history. In 1971, I was 16 years old. We came from the Philippines in 1969, and we had some very hard experiences in terms of my mother's brother was murdered and shot 14 times by the cops. My father was an organizer for Citizens for Good Government, and which was an anti-Marcos under Joe Concepcion. So when we came, I think I went into shock because I lost my name. My name was Maria Luisa Ignacio Battiola. And in Philippine naming, everybody's named Maria after the Virgin Mary. So Luisa becomes your prominent name, your second name. I'm named after my father. And then Ignacio is my mother. So it's like I lost that, and they would call me Maria, and I was not responsive. I also was 14 years old. I was supposed to be a senior. They put me back 1 year because they felt I was too young to be a senior. So that was, a lot of loss of self-esteem. And I was really lucky because I went to Immaculate High School. And in that high school was Filipino Youth Activities, where Uncle and Auntie Dorothy were at. So I wound up volunteering at the first Far West Convention. And I think for me, it was like, I felt like I was in outer space, because when you're an immigrant, we believe literally in the tenets of democracy, justice, equity, and so on. And in the conference, to hear a lot of the pain, a lot of the inequities and oppression, it really changed my trajectory. I wanted to be a teacher. My role model was a nun who was a teacher. And with that, I changed from doing civil rights work. I think it was a joyous time. That was the thing that I found also. It was like seeing about 200, 300 Filipinos, for me, really learning a Filipino American looks all sorts of ways, and that can sound all sorts of ways, and have all sorts of names. And one story I'm going to leave, which I thought it was Mel, but maybe not. The last night after the dance, my sister Teresita and I were in the van, and we're talking Tagalog, and we're saying, "Oh, who's this black guy sitting behind us?" And the black guy moved forward and said, "Ako'y taga Pasay. I'm from Pasay." And so it was really mind-blowing to really realize that we come in all ways, in all forms. And that was just really wonderful. So Auntie, I'm going to pass this back to you. I know you have quite a number of other people.
Okay, this second section, I was going to ask everybody to remember, what do they remember specifically, one specific thing about the convention that they recall all the time, or maybe just for today. It's important because there are a lot of people who are listening in and they want to know what you took away from the convention itself. So this time I'm going to switch the speakers and we start with Mel again.
That almost sound like Mulligan, so I get a free pass.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dorothy, thank you. The thing that I remember most about the convention, and it still resonates in my mind, is the FYA drill team. I'll never get over the sensation that I got when I first heard all the unique instruments being played. I was used to hearing a drum and bugle corps march down, the middle of a football field and do their thing, but there was nothing that prepared me for the drill team, and I think it did something unique to my thinking in that, hey, we can do this. I mean, the Filipino culture is so diverse. I mean, in terms of knowledge and the ability to adapt and thank you, Fred and Dorothy, for putting that FYA group together, simply because it was mind-blowing in a sense that it said, look, here's another version of a drill team. This is something you're not used to, but here's another version, and it was a version that I can relate to. So that was another big plus. So the drill team is something that stuck in my head, but along with that was there was at least 5 2-hour general sessions that went on during the convention. And that was an opportunity for all of us to kind of get together. And it was a perfect opportunity for people to, if they wanted to ask any kind of questions of the panelists or the speaker, but also to, you can see the variety of people, the new people that I was up there to meet. And I was trying to meet as many people as I could to validate what I was doing in Stockton. We wanted to make a difference in Stockton, a positive change in Stockton, and the people that were coming in from all over the mainly the West Coast were doing positive things in their community, and it was just an ideal opportunity to see the I guess you might say role models, the people who were speaking. You can learn in different ways. You can learn by a person's mannerism, the way they present themselves, and the information they have to share. And it was just, to me, a tremendous experience to witness all that. I personally experienced it, and I held a lot of that knowledge with me today. So it's still a etched memory that gave me a purpose in life, so to speak. And I'm happy to be a part of the Funds organization and doing whatever I could do to help. It's amazing.
Okay, Anthony, as chair, what do you remember most about the convention? Am I mute?
Yeah, thanks, Dorothy.
Should be.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So as the chair of the conference, I had 3 major concerns. One was planning, recruiting, and implementing. So first of all, let me talk about the planning. I was amazed at the support of the local Filipinos that participated, the Filipino Americans who participated in the planning committee, because they helped craft what we thought was going to be a pretty nice event, because we included, the typical things, the plenary sessions, the workshops, and then social events every night. And those did occur. But also the amazing thing was the cost. Dorothy, I'm going to assume that you negotiated the $25 cost for the conference, which covered registration, all meals, and overnight stays for the four days and 3 nights. And when you think about it, that was a pretty good bargain. Now, but here was the thing about that cost. It made it possible for a lot of young people to come to our conference. And when they came, they brought with them the typical things of a lot of young people, a lot of I'm going to call it emotions, raging hormones, a variety of things, expectations. And the thing that I remember the most was, while we thought we had planned to meet everyone's needs, we did not meet the needs of the young people who had come to express themselves when they heard about all the discrimination, the racism, the problems that Filipinos, their parents, their relatives, maybe even they themselves experienced as a Filipino American. And there was a lot of pent up emotions, and it took the form of, I think, I recall like there were arguments at times between the different groups. There might have been fights. I mean, there were even other crazy things, that there was drug use. There was maybe even some sexual activity in some parts of the dormitory where we were all staying, but and the whole thing was becoming somewhat disruptive. And so we considered canceling the convention, because there was a lot of a turmoil and a lot of disappointment. However, a young person did say, "Hey, you guys are working too hard. Why don't you let us become part of the convention and let us help you?" And that turned it around. And to me, I had to come back the next day, the morning, say, "Okay, we're going to change the entire format, and this is why we're going to do it." And I recall, and Rodell, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you also spoke. You did have the biggest delegation, and you also had, I think, some of the more vocal individuals in our conference. But you had encouraged them to support what we were doing with the changes, and to really become a part of this conference. So in that sense, I would consider Rodero Rodiz one of the leaders that not only stepped forward, but also really helped make the conference a success, or at least in terms of the magic that took place from 300 or 400 individuals who are fighting among themselves to one unified group that says, "Hey, we have to move forward to make the changes in our society on behalf of our Filipino brothers and sisters, on behalf of our community." Now, one last comment. In preparation for this Zoom webinar, and then an earlier one, and then I was invited by the Filipino American workers at Google to do a presentation. I thought I should do maybe a 1 or 2 page essay, because there's so much information about that convention. Well, that 2-page essay has now become maybe 10 pages. And after this particular Zoom, I'm going to send it out to the Fawn's office, to the Fawn's Museum, to the Bulasan Research Center at UC Davis, and a few other places, to make it part of their files. And what I'm going to do is encourage others, because I'm hearing some wonderful stories today of what really did take place at the Far West Convention. There are 350 attendees. I'm sure there are about 350 stories or so. But we need to encapsulate all of this in a book, so that those our future generations can read about what really did happen, and not just we won't be around to tell it. So we really need to record it, video, print, and then and continue to share it, because it was a watershed event in the Filipino American history. I like the title called "The Birth of Filipino Americanism." That whoever created that, Alan, that may have been you, and I think that was that's a great title. So thank you very much for allowing me to talk and share my feelings. And I'll send out the essay, and I hope some of you read it. I will admit this: when I was writing it, I teared up when I thought about the stories that were told by the young people, because there was a lot of pain being expressed on that Friday morning. And then by Saturday afternoon, that pain and anger and everything else was converted into, "Hey, let's work together and do something great." And out of that came the Filipino Information Referral Center. So thank you.
Thank you. You're right. Maria Battiola.
So, Anthony, thanks for really teeing that up. The speakers were incredible. They were established people, they were intelligent, and the conference kind of felt academic. The kids, not kids, young people, young men, young women, you know, were sort of like kind of moving about. But I think it was really when the young people spoke that it was like mirrors. We were bouncing around. The pain, my pain was, I'm too Filipino, I'm not American enough, and I'm hearing from the stage, they're not considered Filipino enough, they didn't speak the language. And I kept hearing, are they saying, you know, siga siga or sige sige? Siga siga is like, I'm tough, I can do it. Sige sige is let's go, let's do it. You know, so there's all of these mirrors of bouncing around, of not belonging. And I think that that kind of angst that you're talking about that really started, you know, unifying, really broke out into this physical dance at the end of it, in terms of it's like a rumba, makibaka wag matakot. And for me, it's like, wow, they're speaking Tagalog. They're saying makibaka wag matakot. That was mind blowing to me. And that kind of activism, that kind of flair, that kind of fire was really born of pain. And how to move forward was really incredible. The fact that this had a life way beyond the first Far West. And there is this dichotomy about, sometimes I'll hear the term Phil-Im, you know, it's only for Phil-immigrants and Phil-Am, Phil-Americans. Well, they're kind of both, because Uncle Fred kept saying, you know, if you're in America, you are Filipino American. And trying to explain that to my peeps, immigrants, where we don't consider ourselves yet immigrant, Filipino American, because our thinking was, do we really belong here? So the rest of that conference was just like mirrors. I mean, it just kept blowing my mind right and left about what is really going on. And I was getting ready to go to the university, and I was scared because Immaculate is an all-girls school, and there were like 40 to 45 of us when we graduated in our class. And I'm going to UW, wherein the classes are like 300 to 500 for intro. So it was sort of like holding that feeling and then going into another culture shock at the university and being able to hold that throughout to guide my life, to change my life. And I did a lot of my activism with API and women's issues and civil rights. And at the same time, that was really my grounding. I think that was like kind of like the, you know, the baptism of fire, when people who know better, because they've experienced it, they're ahead of you on the curve, are saying, this is going to be the journey, this is going to be the challenge. So thanks, Auntie. I'll pass it on back to you.
Okay, Burmi Amatan.
Yes, I'm here.
Uh,
First of all, I'd like to give my kudos to the Stockton people. They deserve to take a bow, because at the convention, to me, they were the ones that were focused and discussed the things that what could be possible. I remember Luna speaking, and of course, Morris Artiga and Mel Lagaska. And I wanted to learn more what they could do. But at the convention, I also found out that they had an expert individual guiding them, and that was Jose Bernardo. I liked his workshop because he showed us how to how to do grantsmanship. And what did I do with that? Well, what I did with it was to author a bilingual Title VII grant for my school district, which they won on the first time presentation. Although sadly, I was only paid $100 for that. And I declined to write any grants after that, but I wish I had an opportunity to write grants for the Filipino community, but there was no opportunity for that. But going back to the convention, what I did was I simply sat down and watched the different groups of young people coming in, observing them, their gestures, their mannerisms, their speech patterns. And I was asking myself, this must include all of them. There are different types of people. And then when it came to the open microphone, I thought it began like a whisper, and then an increase in crescendo, and finally the voice was heard loud and clear, because the temper of the convention changed. And that was gratifying for me. And I hope it was for the other people as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Luna. Luna?
Yes, I'm here. I'm unmuted. I'm glad I get to follow all you wonderful people, because as you were talking, I couldn't help but think of, I was trying to place myself in that huge room where we all registered, and it was very full of Filipinos of all ages. But one of the things I really remembered was what very resourceful people we had at that conference that I'd never even imagined. I mean, I had met other Filipinos living in Stockton, but on a broad scale like this, where people came from different areas, and the fact that we had Filipinos, maybe not as many as we needed at various levels of government, and people were taking action to get more involved politically. These were things that just really got me energized. And another thing that I really remember was the passion, the energy there that was there. And I remember listening to Rodell, and I never heard anyone speak with such passion and integrity and belief and belief in the struggle, for civil liberties as he did. And he really, I mean, we grew up in a more conservative environment where our speakers were not, we heard the words of Makibaka for the first time that we were there. And I think a lot of that came from that energy, that passion that Brodell brought to the conference, as many of some of the other Bay Area folks did as well. And but I do recall that, when we were listening to Jose Bernardo speak, and of course I was one of those from Stockton as well, and Jose was a mentor to myself, to Morris Ardiaga, a lot of the community activists at that time that were providing support to the Filipino Center. And I was thinking to myself, I thought, oh my God, when we get back to Stockton, the reality of having to plan the 1972 Far West Convention was something that, we were in panic mode, because we knew we did not have the kind of organization that Seattle did. But it's remarkable that, in times of when you're really under pressure, that our Filipino organizations came through. We got donations, as Anthony had said, people stepped to the plate that we'd never thought would even happen. Even we got lettuce for nothing. A lot of the farm workers around there brought all kinds of vegetables that could be cooked. And I mean, but again, that kind of energy and passion stemmed from the 1971 conference. And as we were talking, I remember, I'm not sure, I wish somebody would remember, and I'm glad, Anthony, that you brought up the fact that yes, there was a drug culture on that campus for sure. And some of my own kids I knew were definitely involved. And I just let them know, I said, hey, you guys, you need to understand that if you get arrested, your parents are going to be really mad at me for a minute, but they're going to be mad at you for a long, long time. So think about it. So, but you know, we were lucky. Our kids really learned and brought back so many lessons. I ended up talking to one of the kids that went with us, Arthur Zulueta, not long ago. And he told me, he said, you know, he always called me mom. He said, you know, mama, he said, if it wasn't for that conference, I don't think I would have been as successful and as strong in my identity as a Filipino, as a man, as a family man, as a husband, and as a father. And, you know, he said it all for me because he was exposed to something that he never learned up until that moment. And, you know, it was well worth the struggles that we had along the way, getting up there and getting back. It took us like 24 hours. I remember that very well because we were in a caravan. So we had people's cars that were breaking down along the way. And of course they were all makibaka. Then they wanted to stick together. So nobody was going to leave anybody. And so like 24 hours later, we finally made it back to Stockton. But a lot of that energy and passion also ended up in something concrete in our discussions of what can we do beyond the conference to network, to make sure that, you know, this kind of communication continues on. You know, how do we use these resources? So we came up with a concept of the Filipino Information Referral Center. And that was a concept that many of us weren't really sure. All we knew was we needed to develop a network of Filipino American communities and share our resources at all levels: education opportunities, employment, housing. I mean, there was just so many social issues that we needed to share amongst ourselves, and we had great resource people, but we needed a vehicle to use. And so FERC was something that I was one of the few of the core people that worked on it after the conference. I owe a lot to Morris Artiaga, who was a grants writer and program planner at that time for the city. So he was able to really help in really finalizing the proposal that ended up actually being submitted to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And we were given a verbal approval by the director, but the politics took hold. This was 1972. Who was president at that time? Can everybody remember? Yeah. President Nixon. What did he do? Yeah, President Nixon dismantled the Office of Economic Opportunity and the funding that would have funded FERC. So, you know, we fell victims to the politics, and that still goes on today. That's one of our struggles. And but I just want to share that. Maybe others might have some questions along the way about it. But and again, I'm glad you Maria brought up Makibaka, because I'll never forget that last night when there was such a feeling of togetherness. Like, you know, how can we ever recreate that moment again? And I can still close my eyes and I remember that moment. But anyway, thank you for this opportunity. I hope there are questions later. Thank you.
Okay, Rodell.
Unmute. Yes, thank you, Luna, for bringing that up, and Anthony as well. What I do remember about the convention was the portion where we spoke, because before I spoke, the speaker was Bernie Whitebear. And he was an incredible individual. I had never known him or of him until he spoke. And he was one of the top Native American leaders whose father was Filipino and mother was a Native American. And he led a lot of the struggles for healthcare, for identity as Native Americans. At the convention, he introduced me to other Indipinos, Indian Filipinos, like Ron Miguel. And Ron invited me to Bainbridge Island, and I went to see him and I stayed with him. And he introduced me to other Filipinos who were into, Indian music and Filipino food. And there was such a mixture and people were celebrating. So I got a sense of what it must have been like for Filipinos in the 20s when there were 150,000, I'm sorry, there were something like 25,000 Filipino men in Seattle and only 29 women. I think it was less. But that was such an incredible, so there were so many intermarriages with Native Americans. The other thing I remember at the convention was, as Luna said, my speech. I wanted to be able to thank Filipino Americans for identifying with the Philippines, but I was also disappointed that the identification was more with the superficial trappings of what it means to be Filipino. I referred to the Bahay Kubo, the other things, and to me, they were not the essence of Filipinos. And I said, Filipinos live in Bahay Kubos because they can't afford sturdier homes. So they have a struggle against poverty, against corruption, and we should identify with the struggle. So I asked everyone to do that, just as they're fighting for farm workers' rights. And I asked everyone to chant with me what they were chanting in the Philippines. I asked everyone, and everyone did chant, Maki Baka, Huwag Matakot. That means struggle, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to struggle. And I was so gratified, not only that people were chanting it, but on the final day, as Luna said, the dance, what people were doing, the Makibaka dance, they were chanting Makibaka, Huwag Matakot. And that went on beyond the convention further than I could ever have hoped for. That's why I was very excited. I was very excited about the FYA drill team. That's why I told Dorothy I made arrangements to bring the FYA drill team to San Francisco. A few months later, we had them at the Civic Auditorium and the place was packed on a Thanksgiving night. So that kind of interaction was the result of that convention.
Thank you. Is Ben still with us? Lenore? Or did he?
Yes, I'm here. I'm striking my I'm the sound guy for the reunion. That's why I'm doing double duty here. Anyway, to answer your question, Auntie Dorothy, what were the most memorable that impacted? I'm going to start off with the drill team. My gosh, that made my feet move, and the visual was just overwhelming. In realizing what a community can do to create an image of strength and power, and to see all the young people participating was truly a magnanimous image to behold. The second was Uncle Fred saying, if you have a drop of bagoong, you're Filipino. And I said, right on, right on. Then that means everybody that I know are Filipinos, even though they're mestizos, Mexican, Afro-American. So that was a great feeling because then I could share that with my fellow classmates back in Foothill. And Rodell needs to thank me because it was I who brought the contingency of Foothill College students to go there, which included Edna. And Edna was just new to the country. And I had to beg and borrow to convince her strict mother that it was going to be important for her to go. And of course, the mother trusted me. And sure enough, rest is history. And I'm glad that Edna and Rodell became one. The last thing is that what came out of that conference was I got swept into this room with Luna and Anthony, and Luna and I were trying to figure out who else were there to establish the FERC. Now, as much as it didn't get initiated because of politics, it created the mentality that we needed to connect not just locally, but connect throughout the United States in any fashion that was possible. And as I'll steal it from Luna, it was our first analog internet among the Filipino community. So give credit to this convention and establishing the connecting the dots. And after that, of course, Luna had to take care of Stockton conference. I had to help with Furman and Lucky Amutan with the San Jose. And then, of course, it went to San Diego, and I was driving all the way to San Diego to help the San Diego conference, and so forth and so on. So many of us followed the conferences, and every time we did, it strengthened us. To the point where in 1974, the state of California finally passed a law, which not too many know, passed a law that Filipinos will become and identified as Filipinos in all state documentation and so forth, which then followed through with the counties and the cities. So that's the contribution that FERC and the conference gave to those of us who were mandated to bring change for our position in this country.
Thank you. Okay, Maria, it's your turn. Maria? Is Maria there?
Yeah, I am now. Sorry,
Okay.
Doris.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. Well, I just wanted to bring up two things that could be viewed. They were learning experiences, but they could be viewed as negative. I remember not too long going into the conference when there was an undercurrent that became more heard, more, it gained momentum, that Tony was too white and he didn't even have a Filipino name. And how come he was the chairman or the host for the event. And I remember, as coming from a family of mestizos in a community where Seattle has always had a lot of mestizos with all kinds of different ethnic backgrounds, including the Indipinos that Rodel referred to. I was so angry that those people would say that he wasn't Filipino. He was born in the Philippines. He spoke Tagalog, which none of the Filipino Americans could. So anyhow, that was a learning experience that I don't know how they were able, I don't know who was responsible for having them back off of that, but I know it really affected me that they came that way. They had those kind of negative feelings about it. The second thing was understanding that the Filipinos from different regions, primarily, I mean, we could say it's primarily from California, and different parts of California and from Seattle, that we had different styles of dealing with our activism. And that was hard for me because Dorothy and Fred, like I said, they're my social conscience, but they have always, their way of expressing is to do something positive. And so when people just say mean things or sound so negative, I didn't relate to that kind of activism very well. But I learned how to incorporate what you believe and do what you need to do. And sometimes it means being a little more aggressive, but it never means you have to be destructive. So anyhow, those are some of the things I took away.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Lou, you have the last one. You have another poem for us?
I have a lot of poems, but you know, a lot of memories that are just kind of, you know, just flooding my mind. And you know, the main thing is, like, I remember just meeting so many people, so many other Filipinos, and it was like I met a whole, like, mirrors of myself, you know, parts of myself, with all these people from everywhere, Stockton, Seattle, and, you know, like, I met people like Bob Santos, you know, I mean, role models and people who fortunately became lifelong friends, you know. That's the main thing I got out of the conference, you know, just meeting so many people that became like family to me, including you. And I just wanted to say that I remember the the dance afterwards. And Ben Menor was one of the, like head dancers there. He was getting everybody to do the stroll and everything else. And we were all dancing like crazy, you know what I mean? And I even got like these muscle twinges, that some people had to massage me because it got so intense, and it was just so heavy, right? So soulful. And, so much I got from the conference, reclaiming our heritage and learning about our history, not just in the Philippines, but here in the US. And I also like to say about the FYA drill team. I remember when I stayed with you and you and Fred took me to Walla Walla State Prison, and they performed in the prison, and it was so heavy. I felt so proud to be Filipino. There was tears. Even some of the convicts, I remember the people who were there were crying. It was just so heavy. The impact that the FYA drill team had on people. I mean, there are a lot of those type of memories I have, and I'd like to be able to, put it down on paper or remember more of it. Maybe I can send it to you, if I can just snatch some of these memories from, but it's just transformative. That's all I can say. The whole experience, and it just re-energized me to do more in the community, to go back in the Philippines and make connections there and all of that. So, thank God. I'm glad we had the chance to all get together like this, and hopefully there'll be more of these get-togethers.
Yeah.
Even though Zoom is kind of weird type of doing it, but rather do it in person, right? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you. In the next 15 minutes, it's kind of an open discussion. What I put down, and a lot of you already said some of this, is you did have a better sense of unity after this conference, even though in the beginning we're kind of holding each other away. Did you make new friends? Were you changed, and what did you do in the community? And then a lot of you already said that you remember the Maka Dance. So this is kind of a free-for-all. All of you who felt that you were cut off pretty quick by my 3-minute mandate, you could say something, and I'll cut you off when it's time for us, because we have to close this session. Maybe we will continue at another time, because there's still so much to say and to remember, and we'll probably meet each other in a real reunion, a physical reunion. But right now, who wants to say? It's every man for himself. That's what I put down. Don't be shy. Okay, Riddell.
This is
Riddell
Ben.
first, and then Mel.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Rodell.
Yeah.
It's yours. It's
Okay.
yours, buddy.
Thank you. I was talking to Dorothy earlier this week about this conference, and I told Dorothy that I went into the convention as a Filipino, and I went out of the convention as a Filipino American. And what I meant to say was that I came in wanting to share what the struggles were in the Philippines and to get people to identify with the Philippine struggle. And that was what my goal was. But learning about the Indipinos, having long discussions with Fred about the history of the farm workers and how people have been struggling, I ended up coming with a sense of the Filipino Americanness, such that when I came back, I got involved with the Filipino community in getting the community empowered. I ended up getting appointed to the Public Utilities Commission, where I served as president for 2 terms. And then I was the first Filipino elected to public office in San Francisco, serving 18 years on the community college board and getting other Filipinos in the Bay Area to run for public office and to become as empowered as other groups. But that was the product, the result of that convention. When I told this to Dorothy, Dorothy said, you know, what's interesting is many Filipino Americans went into the convention and came out as Filipino. That is, they became more proud of their Filipino-ness because of interacting and knowing about the culture. So it was that kind of synthesis that happened at that convention that it would take years to understand how that happened.
A lot was happening. Right. Mel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dorothy. And you're exactly right, Rodell. Our identities were constantly being shaped up and reshaped and tweaked up. But going back to the conference itself, when they had the open mic, that open mic session to me was like a mad minute opportunity for people to express themselves in a controlled educational environment, which is something we need to do nowadays. We need to be able to express ourselves and share those emotions, because emotions tell you a story also. That means you're serious about what you're doing and what you're saying. So when those young folks got up, that to me struck a bell that, hey, now they're included. And when you're included in on a conversation or a project or any type of inclusiveness, it makes you feel more a part of what's going on as opposed to an observer. So it's just a unique opportunity for having the right people at the right time during the right, I guess, chronological time in our lives. And we have to, I guess we always have to remember that going back to when Alan when he put down the background of, you know, the different things that were happening, civil rights issues and different busing issues, affirmative action back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we also have to be aware of our generational and our family history experience. We walk around with generational history that our parents and our grandparents and even our close relatives and friends have I guess they impressed us in a way that to shape our thinking to make life better in general. So when we talk about our background, we have to talk about we have to be conscious of our generational history experience, sitting around the table and talking. Sometimes some relatives won't talk about racial issues, and others will talk a lifetime on it because they experienced it. So it's important that we keep in mind the generational experience that we have growing up. And the second thing is that the experience of competition. I grew up competing against different Filipinos in basketball leagues in the 70s, late 60s and the 70s and into the 80s. And I remember going to a basketball tournament where it was a social event, but it was educational because you got to meet a variety of people. And one of the things that I was always asked, you know, in the Filipino league tournaments was, how come you're too tall? And I said, I eat long rice. So, and that sort of dampened the issue, and it sort of added a little humor to it. But in reality, people have questions, and don't be afraid of your mixed heritage or your background. Number one, we're all human beings, and that should be always our reference point. And then we're Filipino Americans or Afro Americans or whoever we want to be. But our Filipino identity really enhances the word diversity in everything that we do. So all I can say is be proud of who you are and your Filipino-ness or your Filipino Americanness or your Afro-Filipino Americanness. Be proud of it and stand up for it and let people know that you have you have the ability to control your future. So with that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
We have 8 more minutes. Anyone else want to share last minute thoughts? Okay, go ahead. Is that for me? Yeah.
Yes. You know, I was thinking about what Rodel already said about makibaka wag mong takot, but there was friction already involved in that slogan because many of the kids were Ilocanos, and who was in control of the government was, of course, an Ilocano. I couldn't discuss this concern about this kind of authoritarian rule among my in-laws because they would probably censor me. But anyway, I became involved in what we call the anti-Marcos movement and marching up in San Francisco. But Rodel didn't realize or didn't know that the late assassinated president visited my mother before he left for the Philippines. That's what really upset me. The fact that they could take a Filipino countryman and shoot him on the tarmac. That's why I became involved.
You know, Furman, I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, I had just returned from the Philippines and I saw that there was such social and political unrest going on there in the summer of 1971. And it was still brewing during the convention, of course. And then in 1972, when Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines, I think obviously it did have impact on what we were doing here in the Filipino communities because, you know, our own parents were so divided. And but at the same time, we also cared very much as to what was happening to our families and relatives under martial law in the Philippines. And I think it was really not that we were against anything that was going or against any efforts to restore civil liberties in the Philippines. I think it was really because our focus had been somewhat changed and divided between especially the younger generation. And I think that's where our energy, some of our energy was a little bit less because the youth gave a lot of their energy to restoring civil liberties in the Philippines. But these were Filipino Americans that had never even been in the Philippines. And again, but I bring that up because I feel like this conference brought up the pride, whether you were born in the Philippines or born here in America, is that if you're Filipino, you're going to be proud no matter what, and you're going to stand up for, you know, and resist whatever is wrong, doing wrong to anybody in our community. And I think our conference and those subsequent conferences that followed strengthened all of us in that way. I mean, here we are 50 years later, you know, and we're still in the trenches. We're still out there promoting. And I think that's a testimony to our belief and integrity that Filipino American history is being written every day, and we are living it every day. We are all examples of that. So I just want to end that by saying, because it's Filipino American History Month, that we take pride in everything that has happened. I thank the organizers behind this. I thank all the speakers and very honored to have shared this time with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have 3 minutes. One last speaker.
That's probably me, Ben.
Okay, Ben.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say 50 years. I'm writing a book about it. because because as I get older, and many of us are, we're starting to lose some of the significant things that happened to us in those 50 years. And that there are many milestones that I'm hearing from all of you and many from me, and including marriages and the birth of our children and so on. And of course, the death of our friends and family members and so on. And I think what's most important is that I can't thank enough the lifelong friendship among many of you, Tony, Luna, Rodell, Mal. You know, we've been keeping touch together through many things. And so, and I thank those who keep the fire going, Mel and Luna with the museum, Auntie Dorothy with the archives. You see, the history of 50 years, like Luna says, we're still making a difference, even though we're maybe 6 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old. And I can't thank enough and the exemplification of what all of you have made to so many lives. And I can tell you, all of you have touched many. And I think that's one of the reasons why the image of our forefathers stand before us, because we cared and we want to do something to make sure that their lives and their legacy did not pass, because we were worried about how much brown is the skin of our color, the color of our skin. So with that, I say Makibaka Hawa Matako, and may all of us continue to fight for what is right.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to add just one thing. Out of this conference, I gained a lot of new friends, young friends who are now grandparents. And the other thing too is I had just started, I was just hired to do research on Filipinos in the United States. And unfolding in front of me was the work I was going to do, especially when the young people started to talk about their pain, especially. And I'll never forget that last dance, that crazy Maka dance. Fred was up on the stage, and I keep forgetting who it was he was with. And the black band was playing music. We were eating, we had a dinner, and all of a sudden they were up there screaming Maka, and somebody hit a cowbell. It went bong, 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 and they were yelling Maka, and all of a sudden all hell broke loose. Right before that, we had told the guys from San Francisco they have to leave on the bus, which was parked outside. And they were yelling, oh, hell no, we won't go. And we told them, no, you have to go. And we danced that Maka dance for, I think, half an hour, 1 hour. I don't remember. I thought the roof was going to blow off the top of that building. It was the thing that really touched me, that, you know, something magic happened that day. And when you guys went away, Luna, you did the next conference. For me, you did the conference after that. And then that's history. And maybe we should continue, like Anthony says, people should write their memories about this thing. Everybody's important. And get it together. I think it should be done. And what we could do, you could send it to the office or wherever, or Anthony wants you to send to a university. But I think we could probably take a look at it. Those of us who are there could be a consortium. So just the last commercial, I think they're going to post the things again of what's happening this month in Filipino American History Month. And also, don't forget the auction, which takes place. And Emil will be doing the second half, and he'll be talking to you about the second group of people who'll be sharing.
And Dorothy, thank you. You know, I just want to take 30 seconds to say what a wonderful history lesson this was for someone like myself who was too young to go to the first Far West Conference. I told a story in the preparation group that I was in high school in 1971. I think I was passing condoms under the supervision of Lou Sakia, who worked for the health department at the time. I don't know if Lou wants to admit to that, but we did our best to stop venereal disease, Lou. That was the beginning of activism. It's also good to see fellow colleague Rodel Rodis. One of my problems or issues, I think, is as a journalist, I try to keep sort of arm's length between activism and journalism, and seeing people like Rodel and the great late Alex Escalmado made me realize that you can come really close to the line before, and you become a Filipino, and you become a Filipino, or as I like to say, an American Filipino, but we can talk about that later. There are so many people who didn't speak here. If you didn't speak here today, come tomorrow. I'll let you speak. It's going to be interactive. We have more people, a new list, and more stories, more questions. And of course, we'll try to go amok. So come tomorrow at the second chapter of this. So nice seeing you, Mark Polito.
Thank you.
Hey, Alan, I think Emily wants to share the slides again. That's what Auntie Dorothy was asking. So if you don't mind,
Okay.
I allowed everyone to share.
So
If you share right now, you should stop his share.
yeah. Alan, can I share the slides? Can you stop your share, or are you sharing the slides?
Is he listening? Alan.
Can you stop his share? Can you stop your share, Alan?
I can't stop it. He's a host, so I can't stop.
Alan, you're muted.
Oh, there you go. Try it
There
now.
we go. While
I just wanted to say a few words, okay? And then you can have it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You.
What happened? I don't even know what happened here.
I turned off your share, so you'll have to turn yours off again there.
What?
Share it again. Share your screen again. Go ahead and start again. Thank you.
Anyway, Zoom is brand new to me, okay? I'm trying to do the best I can. I'm just a dentist. But I just wanted to say a few things, and I'll let you do what you need to do. Okay, Emily? Is that okay? Okay, I just want to thank everybody for being here, because this is a historic event. It was a lot of work, a lot of planning, if you didn't know, behind that. And when you pick up your informational packet, scroll through all this and know all these people, okay? Tomorrow will be a tremendous program, once again. Go towards the end. And now we're gonna do a follow-up, unannounced. So anybody that's 25 years and under, come to October 6th, Zoom in. We're gonna have an open forum. We wanna hear your stories. Because believe it or not, even though all of us were back there in 1971, what you need to get out of this is that we never left. We're still there, but we need you. We need to hear where you're coming from, because we need your energy, your energy. So with that said, I really appreciate everybody coming. Thank you. Then Emily, you got the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bergano. I really want to thank Alan and the Fonz Hampton Roads chapter in Virginia Beach. Fonz Now is their new service project for Fonz, where they host these Zoom sessions for us. So I really want to thank them for managing today's and tomorrow's programs. I also want to thank Auntie Dorothy for coordinating all of this. Y'all, she's 89 years old, okay? She's our unsalaried executive director and founder of Fonz. And so show her some love, because she's been doing this labor of love her whole life, and none of us would be here without Auntie Dorothy. So thank you, Auntie Dorothy, for bringing us all together. Tomorrow's speakers are on the screen. We want to thank Emil Guillermo for agreeing to moderate tomorrow. Larry Flores, Patricia Quintero, Barbara Bugano, Lourdes Markley, Dan Begonia, Florante Peter Ibanez, Tim Dionot, Anna Reynosa Hansen, and Ray Pasqua, who will be kind of piggybacking off of a lot of what you heard today. If you enjoyed today's session, we want to invite you to the Kumu and One Down and Fonz follow-up Far West Convention Reemergence on Thursday, October 7th from 7 to 9 p.m. You need to download the Kumu app at app.kumu.ph/one-down-FB. And from 7 to 9 p.m. PDT, Pacific time, we will have whoever, some other folks talk about today's and tomorrow's sessions, the Far West Convention, and also current youth organizers and students, so we can kind of connect the generations as we do in Fonz. Okay. Tonight after the show, we want to invite you to join the workshop from Songs from Larry, a new musical about Larry Itliong's life by Brava Theater. And this is based on the research by our late, great national scholar and trustee, the Dr. Don Boholano Mabalan. Next week is our auction. Please support Fonz. We rely completely on your donations and generosity. So please support our auction at tinyurl.com, Fonz auction 2021. And auction is in lowercase. You can pre-register there. We'll try to do a live stream too from that and see what we could do to help support Fonz in our national office.
Well, you need to go home.
Okay. And then on August 11th to 13th, is Modern Ben talking? Or August 11th to 13th, join us next year for our Fonz 19th Biennial National Conference, where we'll celebrate the 40th anniversary of Fonz and Auntie Dorothy's 90th birthday. And if you wanted to see some of the FYA drill team, some people were asking for video. You can go to fonz-seattle.org and watch this promo video and see some of the drill team on that promo video for our conference. Thank you to Adoriano for that. And our events, tinyurl.com/FAHM 2021. If you have some events to add to the list, please email, I think it's stocktonfonz@aol.com, Terry Torres. If you missed any part of this or want to review it, the Fonz Museum will be uploading the recordings of this panel and tomorrow's panel after the events. Thank you.
You gonna say final thoughts?
Bye-bye, Bunso. Bye-bye, Bunso.
You doing the closing hour or what? I guess that's it.
Thanks everyone for being so patient and muting yourself. This actually went very well. We had about 107 people come on at one time, so it went very well today. So
thank you, Arnell, and thank you to the whole Fonz Hampton Roads Fonz Now crew. They're doing a lot of background work here. I also want to thank Damian Cordova for helping Auntie Dorothy, and Bibiana Cordova Shannon for helping, and Cecilia Cordova. They're always kind of the behind the scenes folks who are helping Auntie Dorothy with the tech. So much love to the family there. Much love. We did not do the Maka Dance. So does somebody from 1971 want to lead us in the Maki Baka chant dance, please?
It's not here.